this weekend with 59 total fights between them. We have a couple of bantamweights looking to make moves like old Cougs when it comes to closing time. Tony Gravely taking on Victor Henry. They're going to look to lean on that experience and pick up something big. And when you look at both of these guys, Matt, for Victor Henry, I'd say in his UFC debut, he overachieved. He took on Raoni Barcelos, and he fought like he's never fought before. He went out there and put on a performance for the ages and outstruck Raoni Barcelos and threw volume like we had never seen. And for Henry and for both of these guys, champions on the regional scene. Henry was a former deep champion over in Asia. He fought some of the world's best. And outside of just fighting with Deep and fighting with some of those different organizations, Pancrase, another one, you look at the names on the resume. He beat Albert Morales to get that shot in the UFC, which was on short notice. He beat Masanori Kanehara, a guy who's a champion over with Ryzen right now. He beat Kyler Phillips by split decision. Beat Yuki Motoya to win that deep belt. Beat Anderson Dos Santos, who ended up in the UFC. And the one win that I wanted to talk about, he beat Masakatsu Ueda, a guy who had a win over Kyoji Horiguchi in his career as well. So some really, really big names, even though Ueda beat him after that fact. Some giant names on that record for Victor Henry. He's a grappling ace. He really did get it done. He was one of those guys that had good offensive wrestling, but if you took down Victor Henry, you really had to worry about his sneaky, slick submissions. And for Henry, he found his groove against Barcelos with the strikes. He was a giant underdog in the fight. He came in a giant favorite against Raphael Assuncao, who had dropped many fights. And we know Assuncao for getting up to as close as, well, he's ranked number 3 in the division at multiple points when he took on Marlon Moraes, when he took on TJ Dillashaw in the rematch. And for Victor Henry, I mean, Assuncao just decided, well, I went to Extreme Couture for this camp. I'm going to throw veteran Savi out there. And Henry didn't have any of those things that he had in that Barcelos fight. So for Henry, CMMA protege, he's the, team captain at that gym, for Weber Almeida. Recently, Eric Gonzalez cross-trained there, who fights in the UFC. So Victor Henry, great lineage, great gym. That's a Josh Barnett gym. And I want to see more of what I saw in that Barcelos fight. He left me wanting more.
He definitely did.
And when you look at Tony Gravely, I mean, an App State guy. He was a D1 wrestler there. He was a 2-time Virginia high school wrestling champ before he really transitioned to college and then MMA. Tony Gravely had an extensive amateur background. He had an extensive time with King of the Cage, CS, and multiple organizations before landing a Contender Series and now the UFC. For Gravely, overachieved in certain points, underachieved in certain fights, but now we're here with two guys that are on the fringe of the rankings in a loaded bantamweight division. And you heard it, Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier last weekend. This is now all of a sudden kind of their premier division. So they've really kind of been getting that finger to the pulse.
Is it your favorite division right now?
I
think lightweight for me is still the best. Because for me, lightweight has the names to go along with the talent. But again, it's just personal preference at this point.
It is really difficult to try and guess. For me, I'll say it. Yeah, bantamweight is the best division.
Bantamweight's deep AF. Bantamweight goes 25 deep and anybody could beat anybody. So again, if you say bantamweight, I'm not going to disagree. Featherweight's on fire too right now. You ever heard about welterweight? There's so many great divisions right now that are so deep with such great talent.
If you just said what you said to us and to me, to some random person on the street, featherweight is great right now, welterweight is too, they would think that you're a crazy person. But when it does come down to this one, and where I really do cap this off, it's closing time. I mean, time for you to go out.
I know who I want to take me home.
And from the places you will be from, when it comes to Victor Henry, he's almost 36. When you look at it for Gravely, he's almost 32. I guess he's kind of in the middle there, a tweener between 31 and 32. But a lot of road miles on both of these guys. And we can break down all of the fights. We really can. You look at it for them, for Gravely, I mean, he's training for this one, an American top team. Adriano Moraes, Alessandro Pantoja, you've got Kyoji Horiguchi, so I'll throw the picture up there. Brazilian, he's a black belt in Taekwondo. His dad ran a Taekwondo school for years. But for Gravely, he'll pump the jab out there. He's got a great right hand with that overhand, a ton of power. He can tie you up, he can take you down, and already he's third all-time in the bantamweight division with 30 takedowns in 6 UFC fights. He had 11 against Simon Oliveira. Only Merab, Dvalishvili, and Ricky Simon have landed more takedowns in the bantamweight division than Tony Gravely. We're going to see if that plays out against Victor Henry, but a tough task, just like that Simon Oliveira fight was too, because Henry is very advanced with his jiu-jitsu.
He certainly is, and I do think the grappling is going to be a big component of this fight, and I do expect the majority of this fight to be contested on the feet, but I will say this, I do favor Gravely on the feet. I know we have seen Henry throw a lot of volume, but I still think the threat of the wrestling is going to open up some of the power shots for a guy like Tony Gravely, but it's weird that Gravely's getting a matchup like this against a guy who is almost 36, and I do get it to a certain point, because Gravely, to me, you hate to use this term, but I'm going to use it anyways. He's kind of a cleaner of the division. Like, when Tony Gravely beats you, you probably have to go back, take some time off at least, and start to redevelop your game. Not to say he's a bad fighter by any means, but the majority of the time, Gravely's someone who should be fighting prospects, because we know what he excels at. You mentioned it. It's the right hand. It's the wrestling. Does he leave openings open for guys who are sort of that top-tier prospect to submit him, to outvolume him on the feet? Of course he does, but that's why I think this fight against Victor Henry is so fun, because like you had mentioned, Victor Henry, we got the best version of him in his UFC debut against Barcelos, and saying the worst version of him is harsh to Assuncao, because I don't think Assuncao is completely washed. Like, Assuncao is still a very skilled
He just struggles with right hands. Right hooks in particular.
This is my comp for Raphael Assuncao. He's the Ichiro Suzuki of the UFC. We can get more into that by the time we predict his fight. But for Victor Henry, I do favor his volume on the feet. I just don't know if he's going to be as confident in throwing those shots with the threat of a guy like Tony Gravely's wrestling going underneath. So for Gravely, I do see those openings for a lot of his power shots, but it really comes up to him, because the best version of Tony Gravely mixes his striking and his wrestling extremely well. The worst version of Gravely throws his strikes from the outside, resets, and then goes for a takedown from the outside and gets countered a lot off that.
Victor Henry defended 6 of 7 Barcelos takedown attempts. Barcelos is a very good wrestler and good at jiu-jitsu, and he's an even better striker. Victor Henry landed 222 of 397 total strikes. I've never in my life seen Victor Henry put on a performance like that, and I've watched a lot of Victor Henry fights. I've seen him go out there against Kanehara, struggle with the takedown defense at the start of the fight, get his back taken, and then rally in the second round with his striking, his jiu-jitsu. So for Henry, I love the package. For Tony Gravely, same thing is done, but like the old Cougs, will they be about that package? We'll find out in the matchup, Matt. When you look at the odds, Henry is slightly favored. Again, he was roughly a plus 375 underdog against Barcelos, and a 4-1 favorite against Assuncao. So it's been peaks and valleys with those. Now they're trying to reset it. Gravely's last time out lost to Javid Bashrat, who shares some similarities with a guy like Victor Henry. Before that, 2 big wins over Simon Oliveira. Johnny Munoz Jr. dropped him on that quick in-between when Munoz is trying to change levels. If you look at it, a fight of the night in the UFC for Gravely against Brett Johns. You want to see scrambles, brother? That's the fight, and a performance bonus over Anthony Burchak, a guy who's very adept at the grappling. So again, odds slightly favor Henry. The underdog is Gravely. We look at the fan vote on this one, and I bet people are left scratching their heads. I know I am. I'm going to say over under 55% Henry, because he's the favorite.
I think it's under.
I don't have a good gauge on it. You're going to say it's under. All right, so we have a look. And it's over. 612 total votes, 63% Henry, 87% by decision. For the 37% that have Gravely, 81% by decision. It's CMMA versus ATT, coast to coast. It's like B.I.G. and Tupac, but not quite. Matt, when you look at this matchup,
I have a rap reference too for this.
I mean, what's the pick and what's the rap reference?
Do you like 50 Cent?
I love the walkout to 50 Cent last weekend. I'm not a 50 Cent fan.
Hate it or love it, the underdog's on top.
Oh,
I got Tony Gravely in the matchup. I do think his wrestling, again, I worry about him leaving his neck open for submissions. That's something we brought up in every single prediction video we have ever talked about with Tony Gravely. I'm kind of surprised neither one of us had mentioned it up until this point, but I still think the wrestling is going to be enough of an X factor for him to be able to open up with his striking. Now, I worry about the volume a little bit, but like you had mentioned, Victor Henry had never fought like that up until Howdy Barcelos, and I feel like Barcelos, for him, I've mentioned this a lot of times, we kind of talked about it with Carlston Harris, he came to the UFC and got into his prime maybe a little bit too late in life. So for Barcelos, it could have just been an off night for him, and that's why Henry looks so good. So for where the odds are at, for what I've known out of Tony Gravely's skill set, I do like Gravely in this matchup.
And you do have it like really close in terms of height and reach with both of these guys. And for Victor Henry, it's the great reset because you went too far with Barcelos and then he won. Then you tried to get him a win over a former guy who's just at the top for the longest time in
Trying to
Assuncao.
rush him almost.
And he doesn't get it done, so now we're kind of here against Tony Gravely. So you get to figure out the playing field for both of these men. I have Tony Gravely as well as the underdog in the matchup.
Let's go, Craig.
For me, it's with the wrestling. It's a tough fight when you're trying to offer up a prediction because Henry, he's got the counter with the defensive jiu-jitsu. He's great with his offensive grappling. His volume's been there in certain fights. Not just the Barcelos fight, but we'd never seen that out of him before. So it really is a difficult one to try and give you a really accurate pick and prediction on it. Hopefully you enjoyed the preview. Both of us with Tony Gravely in the matchup. And listen, 14 total fights out there on this card, headlined by Jan versus Dvalishvili in this division. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.